Hi, I'm Jesse Janisov, and I lead Data Products Intelligence and Graph for Xbox. This includes products or services whose operations rely on dynamic system design underpinned by data, think loyalty programs, as well as functions including data science, of course, but also decision science, business intelligence, analytics, data engineering, econometrics, graph technology, and graph intelligence. Why graph? Why is it important enough to call out separately and not just another data product or service? It's separate because it's foundational and important enough to be a category unto itself. What do you think of when you hear graph? Some people think security, ease of seeing relationships to a node, or automation, think phone trees, or Facebook/Meta, social graph, a way to describe connections between nodes or people in this case. It's all of those things and more. My journey to this place started as a kid who early on knew he wanted to make games. I spent time working on console games, PC games, mobile games, and web-based social games. I've worked in nearly every role at one point or another that's part of game production, game services, and game operations. Early in my career, I remember learning I was going to be able to help launch a console and the excitement I felt about making console games and fulfilling my childhood dream. Fast forward nearly a decade after making many console and PC games, to me, as a venture capitalist in 2008, looking at the free-to-play phenomena that was taking Asia by storm, and watching companies like Zynga and Playdom start to bring these ideas and lessons westward on the curious platform called Facebook. How can these games, these free games, ever be the same quality as AAA games? They're free. Many of these games are just simple Ajax web pages that are just clicking. Is that even gameplay? I and others pondered these questions. After studying the spread of free-to-play games in Asia, I left venture capital to jump back into games, first at Playdom, later at Zynga, to get into the belly of the beast, to really understand what was happening. This experience completely changed my mental model for the industry and how I thought about building, operating, and delivering games and game services. This is when I realized it was all about the graph. There's an old saying that content is king. High quality content is very important, but today high quality content and experiences are not enough to succeed at scale over time. The content that has longevity becomes a substrate for connecting people. Here's a thought experiment for you. Let's say you're going to spend the rest of your life on a deserted island. You'll have food, shelter, protection guaranteed to allow your comfort and survival. There's nothing on the island other than you and the natural ecosystem that exists there. You can choose to either have access to a library of games that includes every game that's ever been made for any platform, physical tabletop, digital from Oregon Trail on the Apple IIe to modern console games and arcade games and stand-ups and everything in between. Here's the catch. If you choose this library, you must always play by yourself, single player, and will never have any interaction with another human. Option 2 is you get only a physical Monopoly game, but can choose each day to have different people there to play with you. Which would you choose? Is it better to have content that isn't fresh or no longer interesting, but play with friends and family, or have access to infinite entertainment options, yet remain completely alone without human contact? As I reflect on my own journey and why I grew up loving games so much, it's partly because of the amazing content and designs of incredible people like Miyamoto and many others. That content itself is incredibly fun and enjoyable. And because of that, it created opportunities to foster my real-life friendships and relationships. While I have a few strong memories about content, just the way a book or a film or any other art can impact a person, most of my fondest memories involve the people that I played with, whether it was multiplayer and we competed, or it was single player and we took turns and shared in the struggle to finish the game. It all fostered real human connections that formed the basis of a large part of my childhood and later on my adult life. Games are the highest form of art and the best substrate for meeting our basic human need to connect with others. When you look at game subscriptions and say, oh, it's like Netflix, I tend to shake my head. We can watch Breaking Bad together or Game of Thrones together or asynchronously, and it really doesn't matter. It's not interactive. Graphs in the context of linear video are primarily interest graphs. Think people who like this also like that. And the social happens in fan forums online, at work before a meeting starts, at lunch, or in a digital chat once we've all seen it. No spoilers, right? And that's how the conversation happens. It becomes an excuse or tool for us to connect with one another, and the next time we see each other or interact. Gaming also has the same interest graph at play, which we can see with the rise of UGC media and game clips, where moments in time are codified and shared outside the context of the game. And if you don't think that's big, just consider that Minecraft itself has over 1 trillion, with a T, views on YouTube alone, and games like Fortnite are not that far behind. And both of these games and many others likely have many views of private content shared between close friends that didn't make it to a public forum. Games are fundamentally different because they're an interactive medium. The primary social happens during the experience itself and is inextricably bound to the experience itself. Playing together in real time matters more because it's interactive. Our play itself, how we play, what we say if we're on a party chat in real time, is a dynamic expression of ourselves. We become dynamic content for others playing the game. The act of engaging with multiplayer is, in a sense, the most basic form of user-generated content that is intertwined with content in the game experience itself. We connect in that context primarily, as well as the ancillary connections that come afterward in conversations and within other contexts outside the game. This means the player's social graph is inextricably linked to the modern gaming experience. So games, unlike video, have both an interest graph and an embedded social graph. Why does that matter? It makes new business models possible. The free-to-play model eventually permeated all platforms, and free-to-play games make up a vast majority of players and revenues in the global game industry today. These simple Ajax web pages like Mafia Wars became PUBG, Fortnite, Dota, League of Legends, Clash of Clans, Candy Crush, Apex Legends, and many more. The removal of the paywall, combined with the design of these games, leading to uncapped spend potential, allowed payers to subsidize non-payers and additional revenue streams from ads, and ultimately allowed these games to rip through global gaming markets and amass and retain huge audiences through massive player liquidity they offered. This allowed everyone to connect through games. Linear video is passive, neither cooperative nor competitive. And as such, the notion of watching, say, for example, Game of Thrones over and over again on a streaming service and paying microtransactions at different points depending on what's going on doesn't even really make sense. Yet this is the business model that drives a bulk of the gaming industry today. The rise of free-to-play came with huge implications for marketing as well. In fact, the graph is merely a more sophisticated, more granular, and thus more effective tool for marketing games. Marketers used to advertise on TV and print media by placing their ads with content where they hope to find overlapping interests with the gaming audience. This is primitive and coarse. Friends share things in common preferences for entertainment included. The graph, the relationship between people who play, is the key to understanding how people actually play, share, and interact with each other, how content moves through communities and subcommunities, what makes it sticky, and ultimately, in the best case, evergreen. I remember once speaking with a CEO who was going to launch a new MMO during the peak popularity of World of Warcraft. He touted the graphics and gameplay and how he thought it was just going to steal that audience. Of course, it wasn't that simple. The people playing Warcraft, many of them are in guilds, social structures, graphs. It's the social and the connections that people have with each other through gameplay that makes the experience meaningful. He couldn't just use traditional marketing and show pretty graphics to make everyone switch to a new game. And he couldn't bring people to the new game one at a time. He'd have to lift and shift the entire guild. And that is much, much more difficult. The real relationships contribute meaningfully to what make the game fun. And in addition to the table stakes of the great content and design, the default inertia is to stay in the current experience. And the larger the group who share that experience, the more inertia that content has. So that's my take on where we are and partly on how we got here. Is that the end of the story? Where do we go from here? Only time will tell, but I'll share my thinking on some current graph applications for games, and then some thoughts on where this technology could take us in the coming years and maybe beyond. Graph is great for building community. Graph is great for things like payment and fraud detection. It also has increasing applications in safety, security, and many things beyond this. I'm currently thinking about graphs to better understand game communities and subcommunities, how they form and endure, and specifically the role and impact of toxicity. What is toxicity? How do we know if something is toxic or not? The key is in understanding the graph, in my opinion. It's straightforward to apply technology like Community SIFT for text moderation and use AI/ML for audio and video moderation. But semantic context alone is often not enough. I believe that the graph context is the missing piece to help get us there. Lack of moderation causes harm to the most vulnerable in our communities. Yet overly sanitized environments irritate people as they feel constrained in their ability to self-express, particularly amongst trusted connections. The key to this puzzle lies in the graph. Are these new connections or have they been connected for a long time? Do they play together frequently or rarely? A parent playing with a child together every day is very different than an adult stranger playing with a stranger child. Likewise, a group that has been playing together for years is unlikely to want their chat sanitized in any way, and whatever they say to each other is probably by their own norms, not toxic, no matter how it sounds out of context and to other people. It can be an incredibly helpful tool to balance safety with privacy and expression, not to mention costs. It's cost prohibitive to fully monitor every piece of communication across every modality between every player in a large network. Graph intelligence can quickly help us understand which connections, by nature of the connections, require more care and scrutiny based on the attributes of the nodes, the age of the connection between them, frequency of interaction, distance from other common nodes, as well as other information that is well within our reach with graph intelligence. How about something core to basic operations like experimentation? In a vacuum, it's somewhat simple to segment people into A/B or multivariate tests. But what if the thing you're testing is social in nature and people within closed social loops need to have the same treatment for the experiment for it to even make sense or for you to learn? Graph tech can help us segment closed loops within a graph to allow us to test things that prior to graph tech required blunt instruments of poor granularity like geofencing and other primitive techniques. Let's go a bit deeper into the graph itself. We can see the nature of groups and subgroups, their natural sizes, what makes them thrive or wither depending on the actions of folks in the groups. This is incredibly powerful for personalization at the group level. We can start to think about personalization at the group and subgroup level beyond the individual level, and this allows us to surface content, rewards, and opportunities for groups of friends together and give them all ways to share in the discovery of new content at similar times so they can enjoy it together. Even connecting people in the graph that likely should be connected but may not know about each other is an obvious opportunity. For example, one of our most simple recent tests was adding graph-based features to our ML models for suggesting friends, and this yielded a 24% higher connection rate, which is material on such a simple adjustment. These things and much more are possible today, and the future holds more for us in our industry. The advent of Web3, play to earn, and the metaverse have broad implications that are too complex to understand without graph technology and graph intelligence. The advent of cloud gaming will have material implications for our industry. Instead of a specific hardware endpoint, we can deliver content to any surface with a display, internet connectivity that has access to user input. Experiences will come to people where they are and with whomever they're with. The call to action for consoles for a console ad used to be, go to the store and spend hundreds of dollars and buy some hardware and then buy some games. And now the call to action will become click to play, and will in some ways be a redux, I believe, of what we watched happen when the free-to-play business model met with the global ubiquity of mobile phones. Mobile gaming is over half the gaming market now, last I checked, and is still growing faster than console and PC combined. These games are approachable, accessible, and this, combined with the ubiquitous endpoint to deliver them to, created incredible growth that seems to have sustained thus far. If we learned anything from the free-to-play revolution, it was that tying payment to time engaged scales and allows for haves to subsidize folks who don't want to pay, allowing everyone to jump in when it's used in its best forms. Players who have time but are short on money can often grind to get to a certain status or earn items and progress, and players with less time can skip ahead with payment. These lessons provide useful lens for us to consider play to earn. In its current form, Web3 and play to earn look like free to play, sort of, but instead of the payers just paying to skip ahead, they wind up paying effectively other players to grind for them. In some sense, it's like replacing automation with Mechanical Turk. This attracts players who, in free-to-play, might get ahead by grinding because the payments that the free-to-play whales made to publishers, in some sense, are getting redistributed to these worker players. It is, in some sense, a classic labor market economics, and we see this already with the advent of groups like Yield Guild. There are many questions we still have to answer, and the current models almost certainly will evolve over time, and many different outcomes are possible from where we are today. Regardless of where this heads, the one thing that I'm certain of is that graph intelligence is likely going to be one of the best tools we have to make sense of it all. As NFTs produce bespoke tokens, their value is related to the game from which they sprang, as increased or sustained interest will naturally sustain the value of these underlying assets. Looking across a broad community of players with visibility into who is there to have fun, who is there to really earn, and how various subcommunities form within these pools provide insight and visibility into creating more stable and fair ecosystems that can endure over time. Overlaying an interest graph on top of the social graph will provide incredible insights into what content is adjacent to other content, as well as into the groups using this content and how they will sustain, migrate, or change over time. And when this is the live macroeconomy that Web3 promises, these graphs will become the cornerstone of building and operating healthy and sustainable ecosystems and sub-ecosystems. Even the metaverse, which people even now still have divergent views on what it exactly is, regardless, will rely heavily on graph and graph insights in almost any scenario or future state I can imagine. One way to view the internet itself is as a series of interconnected destinations, communities, and interests. The metaverse adds to this the notion of interconnected realities, and graphs can describe, from the perspective of a node, where they are, which could be digital or physical location, or some combination if that's relevant, when they are, and what they are, which avatar, whether it's the avatar that's what's on my passport that was given to me at birth, or another one I created in some other context, and how they are. How is the reality for that node or the who at that moment, which is the dynamic that they encounter when they connect with other nodes in this ever-evolving collision of multiple dynamic graphs. I realize this sounds a little bit academic, so let me share an example that hopefully will help illustrate what I'm talking about a bit more clearly. Imagine you were supposed to play a game with your guild later on today, meaning you should be at your computer at a certain time to play. Your guild communications could be directly in game, or if you've shared one or more of your other identities, could spill out to your phone in the real world via your WhatsApp, Viber account, or any of the numerous possible chat applications there are. They can reach you wherever you are physically and or digitally, as long as that other graph reaches an endpoint accessible to you, maybe your phone in this case. The phone is what ties together your Discord, WhatsApp, Facebook, Xbox, and any other accounts, since you can access all the nodes of you in those graphs from that endpoint should you choose. Today, it's the ultimate bridge between your physical reality and any of the other digital realities that you're a part of. To me, this is really all about all of these graphs being allowed to penetrate each other so that the digital equivalent of the physical phone in your pocket is really deeper connections from these graphs that will allow communication in and out of the graph without leaving your current context. I'm Jesse delivering this talk, but my phone may go off with a message on my Xbox app from P3 asking me to join his Halo game. The message is directed at the who, that is my gamer tag, can reach my physical who through the phone, in this case as a bridge. The other reality, my Halo universe, is now pulling me into it out of this physical reality that I'm in right now. Let's take it another step. All nodes, regardless of what graph you establish connections with, will be increasingly importable and exportable to and from any context. You can be on your phone in an experience with friends, and cloud provides the technical foundations to bring any context or experience to that context, along with any wallets, and the promise of Web3 DeFi just removes friction from this potential future. I may be chatting with a group of friends in some context, and any one of us could invite a new reality, the game world say, to that social group, and we could enter it together and continue our interaction in a game. There are many examples of the blurring between our physical and our digital realities that extend well beyond games. Even now, we can imagine self-driving cars collectively working together to minimize traffic jams by optimizing routes for maximum throughput for everyone. And since the car is driving, maybe your focus is off somewhere else in a different context, while the physical car transports your physical avatar, you. When our physical data is digitized and we get optimized centrally by a mapping system, including guiding all cars, it starts to look like the kind of experience you could do inside of a game world, where central memory contains global information about all the things in the world, and new optimizations and experiences will naturally ensue. Perhaps someday the HOV lane will be the lane we are forced to use if we're driving manually instead of the carpool lane as it is today. Only time will tell. In summary, all of the things from traffic patterns, social connections, endpoints like mobile or console, physical location, and more are merely just different graphs of data. At Microsoft, we put the player at the center of all we do. And truly, the one thing that stays the same, regardless of whatever else changes, is that we're all people. And there are just more things that have more ways to interact, influence, and impact us. Graphs are increasingly important, and it's the best analogy for the human experience, with self as a node in the graph that can connect, interact, and impact with other nodes in any of the graphs that touch our node. Physical has been the default since before recorded history, and to make sense of not just where we've come from, but also where we're going, graph intelligence will likely be one of the most useful tools we have. If we ever meet in any one of the many graphs that we're a part of, please do let me know your thoughts. And I hope that there were some ideas here that at the very least got you to think about things maybe a little bit differently, if not introduce some new ideas to you. Thank you for your time and attention, and please enjoy the rest of the conference.